Institute of Directors held its 2023 Annual Directors Conclave and 33rd Annual Day at the Le-Meridien in New Delhi. This much-awaited day-long event brought together policymakers, industry leaders, board members of corporates and the who's who of the corporate sector onto a single platform to discuss and share insights into emerging trends in corporate governance and building futuristic boards. Lieutenant General Surinder Nath, President of Institute of Directors, along with guest of honor, Honorable Justice Uday U. Lalit, former Chief Justice of India, and distinguished dignitaries Jayant Sinha, Chairperson, Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance, Member of Parliament, and former MOS, Finance and Civil Aviation, Tuhin Kant Pandey, IAS, Secretary, Department of Investment and Public Asset Management, Ministry of Finance, Sunil Kant Munjal, Chairman, Hero Enterprise, and Nitin Sethi, CEO, Aeon Consulting, were some of the distinguished dignitaries who inaugurated this year's IOD Annual Directors Conclave.
Today, the theme of this conference is Emerging Trends in Corporate Governance and Building Futuristic Boards. Our discussions at today's Annual Directors Conclave will provide you all a suitable platform for exchange of views and networking to synthesize approach for future course of action.
I think over the next couple of decades, genuinely I think are India's decade. The idea is how do we make this growth sustainable, how do we make this growth responsible in ever so changing world where newer challenges keep coming up, I would say if not every month, every couple of months. So what happened during COVID was unimaginable of what you wouldn't have thought of it 5-7 years back, with what's happening with the Ukraine crisis and supply chain disruptions, what's happening with China +1, what's happening in many other parts and frontiers. And I think that's where with so many different kinds of challenges, companies and CEOs and promoters and chairmen are genuinely looking at boards as partners, as people who can come in and bring deep experiences, expertise, help companies navigate and be responsible about growth and work through some of these things.
The roles of the boards becomes important because the boards operate as a hedge between the company, the executive and the owners, and also as a bridge between the company and society, both being very critical roles. The roles of boards must be seen not just as the holders of the philosophy of the enterprise or the conscience keepers of the companies, but a bigger role as a bridge to community and society.
The corporate governance framework, as you know, is to some extent it's uniform. The Companies Act 2013, the rules, regulations. If you are listed, then there is a SEBI rules, there's a competition laws. But for public sector enterprises, there are also special rules. Now, why I am saying so? Because these are things which are pretty unique to CPSCs. And of course, it also throws up some other challenges that I'll allude to. And the boards themselves of these CPSCs need to really concentrate on the risk management rather than the nitty-gritty and leave the rest to the operational management. But the risk management is something which the future boards of the CPSCs must also take care.
Your logo, your slogan, building tomorrow's boards, I think is exactly right. We have to build tomorrow's boards. We have to really start to think about what are the major trends, what are the major priorities that we have to position India and our corporate sector for. So building tomorrow's boards is exactly the right way to frame the important issues that you have to engage with. And the area that I have been thinking about as far as tomorrow is concerned is really about what should India's development model be. We have to develop a totally different development model, and that development model has to be a net zero development model instead of staying on the farm to factory unsustainable trajectory we are on. We need a farm to green frontier. a farm to green frontier development model that improves our sustainability and at the same time creates more green jobs. So we've got to have a totally different development model, a net zero development model. I call it the green frontier development model, where we combine frontier competitiveness. That is, we are as competitive as anyone, if not more competitive in the world. On the one hand, competitiveness and sustainability. We combine competitiveness and sustainability. That's when we get to the green frontier. That has to be our development model. We have no choice. We have to invent that.
We are the most populated nation in the globe. We have huge pool of human resources. We have huge pool of youngsters who are there. Please think of utilizing this great potential, which is the human resource that we have. Our children, our youngsters are doing exceedingly well when it comes to education, when it comes to ideas, when it comes to levels of intelligence. The only thing is they don't have the opportunities. You are the directing minds. You are the gray matter of the corporate sector or the institutional sector. You can think on those lines. Please consider that.
After the inaugural session and keynote addresses, the souvenir for the conclave was released, along with the release of IOD handbooks on corporate governance, independent directors, ESG, and transformative technologies. The distinguished dignitaries also felicitated IOD institutional life members.
Increasingly, the responsibility and the functions of the directors are becoming important for any strategic input and for the sustainability of the organization.
We already know that there are, women are underrepresented on the boards, and increasing number of women, at least, 30% women on the boards would really make a very good mix on the boards and make them a very robust bodies to delve, on critical issues that are faced by the boards today.
Very crucial for board to embed ESG strategy in their business strategy. It's very crucial for the board is that when they look at any investment, any capex, any acquisition, they always evaluate long-term impact of that investment, not only from profit standpoint, but also from ESG standpoint.
The conclave witnessed experts engaging in insightful conversations around corporate governance in the emerging global economy.
The people wonder that, all right, the corporate governance is important. In fact, the ESG, these days you see a lot of buzzword around the ESG. The ESG, if you see environment, social, and again the governance there. So the governance is there itself, there also. So therefore, governance is very, very important. This particular forum, why this forum is very, very important from the corporate governance types. This is an institute of directors, and many of you are, the directors in the various companies, and you are, the directors are responsible for corporate governance.
This is the year of India's G20 presidency, and the IOD Annual Directors Conclave, held just a few days before the G20 summit, saw the participation of Special Secretary for G20 Operations, Muktesh Pardeshi. He shared his insights on India's role in the G20 and emphasized the significance of corporate governance within it.
G20 has emerged as a global and premier economic forum, not only to discuss financial issues, but also to deliberate upon other socio-economic challenges of the time. The G20 presidency works through a troika system. In order to conduct our presidency, the Union Cabinet created some kind of the organizational structure, and at the head of this board is the Prime Minister himself. So we have an apex committee consisting of the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, Finance Minister, Minister of Commerce and Industry, and this apex body gives the overall directions. They set up the priorities for our presidency.
We're talking about governance here, and while the Indian government seems to have done a lot of things to enable many of these transitions to become successful, whether it is the Gati Shakti program, the Sabarmala program, and so on and so forth, and a lot of these investments have actually been made by the government. I think one of the things really which stands out, and of course I should not forget to talk about some of the FTAs that we have been working on, and there's a lot of work which has been done. It requires active support from the industry, and I think that's where the role of boards and corporate governance really comes in. If you look at how the wealth creation happens in any organization or any society, a lot of that is going to be driven by the work that the public sector will do. But the private sector will have to go hand in hand. And in some ways, if we all say that we have the responsibility towards society, we will have to be trustworthy. And that is where the role of particularly the board becomes very important. At the end of the day, the goal of the executive and the board is almost the same. We want the organization to grow, and we want it to be more trustworthy, we want it to be more respected.
In India, under Articles of Association, you could have board members that are permanent and not liable for rotation. Now, under the new amendment, the shareholders, by a special resolution, every 5 years have to approve the appointment or the reappointment of such directors. This excludes whole-time directors, independent directors, government nominees other than public sectors, but includes all other directors. Again, it becomes important to look at the Articles of Association to see if there are any limitations, and those need to get amended. To look at the appointment, reappointment terms of directors, and more importantly, to figure out what kind of communication is required when such director comes up for the purposes of voting by shareholder. How do you communicate the work performed by the director and the performance, because it is likely that reports from proxy advisors would become points of reference. So these are some of the key changes that have happened, and you would have seen for each of these changes, there is a significant impact on the requirements that companies need to have and the processes and controls that they need to place, because ultimately, as members of the board, it is your responsibility to comply with these disclosures.
Governance is the key component of responsible business, and today's board should basically look at sustainability. That's the most important thing, which will enable them to have responsible business.
IOD has a great contribution. It's a 33-year-old organization, putting together all brains of the corporate world together, and they are doing a lot of brainstorming, and many new ideas are coming. Many eminent speakers are coming, giving beautiful ideas.
The day-long conclave was marked with thought-provoking discussions, engaging conversations to discuss emerging trends in corporate governance and build futuristic boards. Institute of Directors celebrated its 33 years of service with its endeavor of building tomorrow's boards. Policymakers, industry leaders, and other dignitaries joined in the celebration of the 33rd IOD Annual Day.
As we go forward, and now in the year where India is leading G20,
and we are seeing that the role of India in the global economy is increasing. The kind of responsibility which we have upon us as a country, as a society, as a business society, and as individuals has enhanced multifold. We are clearly understanding that ESG is something which is for our own good and is something which is clearly putting across that how sustainability is driving scalability in times to come. I think if all of us really try and take this step forward with many more initiatives which are coming across is what would change, and India would become, I think, the corporate governance capital of the world.
When we talk of corporate governance, we really are not only speaking in terms of the listed companies, but we are talking in terms of the companies as a whole. And therefore, when we talk of corporate governance, we need to understand the compliances and the regulatory framework in which the whole ecosystem operates. I would like to point out is that how do we see the business? Do we see the business only in terms of that they are deriving the revenue and the profits, or we see something more? As I dwelled into some of the big companies in India, I saw their vision statement, and I saw that they are completely aligned to the concept of business, not only in terms of creating a value for the stakeholders, but also businesses with the purpose. And what is that purpose, and how do we define that purpose? That purpose is essentially a purpose for the community and for the stakeholders.
Few thought process, the ideas I thought I'll share with you. One is, if we think in terms of law or the community level, if we can think in terms of a social value performance index. The other day in some other meeting, I was talking about the possibility of a global investment legislation for India. If there could be a possibility of such a legislation where the facilitative element of generating wealth and good wealth for all of us is possible, and also let us try to connect it with certain other concerns, and that concern would be how do we really look at the corporate engagement in social value performance index. So if corporate governance can think about a social value performance index, and that can become again a part of a legislative framework. Right? That's where probably innovative ideas in law, innovative ideas in corporate engagement, I think will probably usher in India's engagement and India's roadmap.
Honorable Union Minister of State for Law and Justice, Parliamentary Affairs and Culture, Shri Arjun Ram Meghwal, graced the occasion with his presence.
इस 21वीं सदी के हम अभी तीसरे दशक में चल रहे हैं. इट्स ए 21st सेंचुरी. हम तीसरे दशक में चल रहे हैं और तीसरे दशक में 2 दशक बीत गए. लेकिन जब पहला दशक शुरू हुआ था तब एक पूरे संसार में एक हवा थी कि 21वीं सदी भी नॉर्थ अमेरिका की हो. सदी हमेशा कॉन्टिनेंट की होती है, माइंड इट. कोई देश उसको लीड करता है. वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड के जो लोग, जो सदी तय करने वाले लोग हैं, वो स्पष्ट रूप से बोल रहे हैं कि 21वीं सदी एशिया की होगी. वन पैरामीटर इज डेमोक्रेटिक सेटअप. जो देश सदी को लीड करने वाला है उसमें है या नहीं. तो अगर चाइना को 10 में से नंबर देने पड़ेंगे तो डेमोक्रेटिक सेटअप के लिए कितने नंबर देंगे और इंडिया को कितने नंबर मिलेंगे, बताओ भाई. चाइना सब कह रहे हैं 0, इंडिया को 10 में से 10, क्योंकि हम पंचायत से लेकर के हम डेमोक्रेटिक सेटअप रखते हैं जी. तो ये डेमोक्रेटिक सेटअप, इकोनॉमी एक दूसरा पैरामीटर है. तो इकोनॉमी में हो सकता है चाइना को अभी नंबर ज्यादा मिले, लेकिन हमारी इकोनॉमी भी कमजोर नहीं है जी. अब हम देखिए 5th तो लार्जेस्ट इकोनॉमी बनी गए हैं और प्रधानमंत्री जी का साफ कहना भी है कि हम इतने सुधार कर रहे हैं, ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस से लेकर के जितने भी फालतू के कानून है उसको समाप्त कर रहे हैं. 1500 के आसपास कानून समाप्त किए हमने. तो ऐसे ईज ऑफ लिविंग, ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस, ऐसे कई एक्ट नए नए ला रहे हैं, IBC से लेकर के GST से लेकर के बहुत सुधार करने की कोशिश की है। तो इसका मतलब हमारी इकोनॉमिक की साइज IMF ने भी कहा कि 3rd हो जाएगी इंडिया की, इसका मतलब हम तेजी से आगे बढ़ रहे हैं, इकोनॉमी में भी कमजोर नहीं है। ये पक्का आपको कह रहा हूं कि 21वीं सदी एशिया की होगी और उसका नेतृत्व भारत ही करेगा।
The conclave concluded with the felicitation of this year's IOD Distinguished Fellowship.
I think in addition to the usual stuff, what's critical today is you've got to be more forward-looking. So ESG, climate change, cyber are becoming very important things to think so that you're not disrupted by any chance in your business.
Directors should listen to each other. That's the first strategy. Nobody teaches you listening skills and you have to learn it. It takes trouble to learn listening skills. The second thing is you should come with an open mind. Very often directors come to a meeting with their mind saying, I'm inclined to do it this way, but you should listen to open. And the third is you should get a better solution out of the debate than the one you started with.
We've been often asked about IOD's abiding commitment to the continued upgrading of boardroom functioning and its relevance for the continuing India's growth story. In this context, I would briefly quote Peter Drucker, who is arguably the Shakespeare of modern management and boardroom functioning. And I quote, "Our society has become, within an incredibly short period of 50 years, a society of institutions. IOD train and mentor directors for the reason that they are the kingpins of board's functioning and its performance."